Good evening and welcome to Randwick City Library Author Talks Live Online. My name is Christine Brennan and I'm the Library Supervisor of Events and Marketing. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which each of us are on. I pay respect to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and I celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal cultures and languages across Australia. I acknowledge the Gadigal and the Bidjigal peoples, who are the traditional custodians of this land where Randwick City Library is located. And I invite each of you to acknowledge the country where you are. Our guest this evening is Dr. Mary O'Connell. Céad míle fáilte go dtí an leabharlann cathair Randwick. Welcome to Randwick City Library's Live Online, Mary. It's a privilege to have you here with us tonight. Are you there? Hi, I'll continue. We had originally intended for this event to be a hybrid one where we would have had some of you attend in the library, and it's a shame not to be able to see you, but I'm very pleased we were able to put on tonight's event regardless of any lockdowns and whatnot, and we hope to see you back in the library as soon as we can. So let me formally introduce Mary. Dr. O'Connell, or Mary if I may, is a Taranaki-born Sydney-based writer, editor, historian and community arts organiser with a particular interest in matters of spirit. She has produced photographic calendars celebrating Sydney's pools. She's a member of the Randwick Community Organic Garden and a Randwick and Coogee Ladies Swimming Club, and a proud member of the Australian Women's History Network and the Irish Studies Association of Australia and New Zealand. So a very accomplished member of our community. We're so proud to have you here tonight. In her latest book, The Country of Our Dreams, Mary weaves a dual narrative story set in modern day Coogee, centred around the Ryan family, and early 19th century Ireland, featuring Michael David and the Irish Land War. For those who aren't familiar with the history of Ireland, Michael David led the globally based Irish Land League, which was founded just one generation after the Great Famine, when over 1 million Irish people perished and many more were scattered across the globe. The Irish Land League arose when a new crop failure threatened the people of Ireland with a second famine. This time round, a radical idea began to take hold that famine was neither divine nor natural in origin, but a political event based on unequal power relations. The Ladies' Land League would soon follow, headed up by Fanny and Anna Parnell. As someone who is a dual citizen of Ireland and Australia, I've lived here for almost 18 years now, and I'm very proud of my Irish background and culture, and I thought I had a reasonable grasp of Irish history. I was a little bit surprised at how much I had to learn about Michael David and the Irish diaspora in general. It is for this reason that I love reading dual narrative books, and I could get the sense that you, Mary, the author, had an enthusiastic respect and fondness for the handsome Michael David. Just a little bit more about how your story about Hilary, who was from a traditional true blue Aussie family, you'll read about that in this book, and her relationship with the handsome Vianney, who had a rich Irish cultural heritage, and then it broadened into your dual narrative featuring Michael David, B. Walsh, Anna and Fanny Parnell.
Well, thanks, Christine. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for all your work in organising this event. Hello to all the people that I can't see. And before I answer that question, if I can remember it, I also would like to acknowledge that I'm here today on the land of the Bidjigal and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional owners and custodians of Sydney's coast. So, and I'd like to also say that I support the Uluru Statement from the Heart, calling for a First Nations voice to Parliament to be enshrined in the Constitution. I wish to respectfully acknowledge any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders listening here today, and I pay my respect to elders past and present. So I just wanted to say that at the beginning. So, yeah, so the question is, how did it become a bloody dual narrative? Yes, because it wasn't meant to be. My initial desire was to explore through a marriage or through a relationship, shall we say, of what happens when people with the Irish inheritance meet or mate with people without it. And how to explain ourselves, really, in an inexplicable tradition. So the characters were supposed to be the Ryans of Coogee, which is the family that she marries into, were supposed to be all, to a certain extent, and haunted, partly because they have inherited a glorious ancestor, Michael Davitt, who led the land war in the 1879 to 1882. Things that I did not know when I began writing the book. I still thought that it was possibly the famine, which is the intergenerational trauma carried by Irish and the diaspora and the Irish in Ireland. And I discovered at some unmemorable phase the land war, which showed me a whole different way of a success story. Like, it changes the story of failure. And I had to ponder a lot of ways as to how such a major success as the Irish Land War is buried in Irish mainland narratives, still slightly remembered in diaspora narrative. Davitt, as I said, is a trace element. The story of Michael Davitt is a trace element. A friend's father had a bit of a devotion. People had devotions to Davitt. And he's mentioned, of course, in the famous James Joyce book, in the battle, the Christmas Day dinner party battle between the Fenian and Tante. Anyway, well, I'll go on too far. I'm going too far. I'm going to pull right back.
Well, my theory is that so the Great Famine was such a changing event in the Irish history. Then we come to the 1960 Rising, and it kind of got squashed in the middle. So we, even though it was such a profound part of our history, it kind of gets spoken about a lot.
But I think it's partly lost because it doesn't fit the glorious death victim stuff of Patrick Pearse. I think it doesn't fit into that narrative. It's left out because it was intended to be non-violent. Of course, it was violent because there was psychological violence as well, but there weren't many murders. As it says in the book, it's a war of letters, not a war of bullets.
Yeah. And so we meet, so the Ryan family, it's quite, they've got their issues, and you get to read all about that. And of course, one of them is alcoholism and the effects that has on the family. But Xavier, who's one of the less functional, let's say, he's writing a novel about Michael.
Yes.
Yeah. And then Sienna also has a very strong connection with Michael. So
yes, she's researching for her PhD, her part-time PhD up at an unnamed university up the road in Randwick, that of women writers who were liberated by the Irish Land War. The Land War did produce some marvelous women writers, some of whom I've given papers about and whatever. That I tried to poke as many of them in without destroying too much plot lines. I am told off for having too many characters, but there are some people that you think, well, where else are they going to be speaking? They have to be in my book. So that was the scenes in the library, in the reading library in Leinster House, where the women reading poetry and
did that
philosophy.
happen?
Yes,
I'm curious about that.
Yes, that's all true. All those scenes, and Hannah Lynch and Katie. Oh, Katie. Now see, I've gone blank. Catherine Tynan, the poet. She, thank goodness, she did write a memoir about the Land League, the Ladies' Land League, and a lot of what Sienna says is. And
I should point out for our listeners tonight, there's actually a fantastic bibliography in the back where you can find all of the resources that Mary included. And I should also say, I was remiss, I didn't say it in the beginning. If you do have a question for Mary, we are doing Q&A. Please do pop them in the Q&A box. And we will take that later in the thing. Or even if you just have a comment to make or just want to say hi.
A nice comment.
Nice ones, yes. Isn't it, if you've nothing nice to say, don't say anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But you quite clearly, because, I think more than half of the book is about Michael Davitt and how he came to be. What? Tell us a bit about your journey with Michael.
Yeah, David took it over. He wasn't intended, and yeah, he took it over big time, and I had to let him have his way. He's such an attractive character. So
you've got some photos of him.
Oh yes, okay, cool. Sharing screen. I've got photos of him as a. That's him in the time of the Land War. He's 46. He's 30, in his early 30s. He's already losing his hair, God bless him. But I'll show you a picture of him. That's the leaders of the Land League at a representation of the time. I'm just trying to find a picture of Michael when he was, oh, look, gorgeous. So that was when he was a young, active Fenian. I'll just let people look deep into those dark brown eyes and feel the power that's coming from him. I think in some ways, he personified a generation's pain, being the child of evicted Irish tenant farmers, having had an accident in the mills of Lancashire, those dark satanic mills. Like, he is a man with nothing except all his inheritance, and he was bilingual. His mother never learnt English, and he's tied to both the land and the modern world. There's something sort of relentless about him and something noble about him, I found. There was a story, the Land War, there was a magistrate appointed by the British government to try to recontrol the countryside. And he brought police around inspecting, or, there was a lot of bullying, obviously, trying to, with police and military presence, to prevent Land League meetings, etc. So he was at one of Michael Davitt's big talks from the back of a cart, and he said something complimentary in his memoirs that, clearly Michael Davitt was a sincere person who believed in what he was saying, even if what he was saying was utter rubbish. But the thing is that Davitt sent an invitation to this magistrate to say, come and join us for tea, because we're at the same hotel. And the guy said, well, of course I couldn't take up the invitation. And I thought, how classically Davitt to not be afraid and to seek to share information, like to seek to speak. He wasn't, he's gone now because we just can't let him take over anymore. But I just was very impressed by that story from the other side, that he wasn't them versus us. He sought to make alliances.
He was very respectful of women, or that's what felt from your writing.
Yes, I believe he was respectful for women, and he had great admiration for his own mother's courage in facing their hardship. And he supported the Ladies' Land League all the way, against opposition from the gentlemen who felt that would challenge women's, purity. So that was a wonderful battle. I felt I didn't have time in the book to devote enough space to the struggle for those women to speak in public and to organise their own league meetings. The Archbishop of Sydney, there you go, classic. Archbishop of Dublin. The Archbishop of Dublin came out and condemned them furiously for breaching the purity of womanhood. And then the Archbishop of Cork came out and said, no, they have every right, piss off. So one reason why the Archbishop of Cork, Thomas Croke, Irish people will know him because of Croke Park. I hope they never change it to something like, Westpac or Allied Irish Park or something.
Oh, I think there would be outcry if they tried.
Yeah, because he was
could be wrong.
He was a decent person, and he, in fact, was Bishop of Wellington at one stage, Wellington to New Zealand. So, like, they all did the circuit, the Diaspora circuit.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a bit about because it was a bit news to me. I had a conversation with my own dad, actually. I didn't realise that there was such a huge amount of Australian diaspora support at that time. They actually...
Thank you, Christine, and you can thank us.
Yes.
Yes, the Australian New Zealand colonies, so we're not sure who they were, the colonies of what, but they were the colonies anyway. They were very profoundly upset over the threat of the famine returning, like the Americans and Canadians and South Africans, which I don't think it's called South Africa in those days. But anyway, the diaspora was very panicked because it was carrying a very recent trauma. So they were very quickly organised. In Australia, it was very non-sectarian. It was done with all the religions. You know, they had panels and fundraisers with the rabbi and the Anglicans and the Catholics, and I'm not certain whether they had Presbyterians, but they really did their best to have holistic response from all the communities as a compassionate ground to raise all this money. So they raised an enormous amount of money and they sent it off very fast. That was money gone through systems that we can record. People can't record money sent by families to family. And the Lord Mayor of Dublin called it a magic shower of gold that actually saved the starving population from death. So later on, the harvest of the next year wasn't too bad, and a lot of people who had acted out of charity, they pulled back, but they moved forward, changing the social conditions that not proposed famine, but created famine. That was too unstoppable by now. But you would have had some people less thrilled once it became a battle for land ownership. You wouldn't have had quite so much money coming through because it was asking them to fund a revolution.
I found it quite fascinating, the amount of travel that Michael Davitt managed to do, because a good portion of his life was spent in prison, or his adult life.
Yes, yeah, a quarter of his life was spent in prison. Yes, no, but he was indefatigable. He was a traveling man, and yeah, he came to Australia, he was very interested, came to New Zealand as well. And he was very informed, and people flocked to hear him say what he thought. He was more radical probably than most of them. Like, he wanted nationalising the land, really. He didn't want any more private ownership of land. So he was in some ways left behind by the nationalists because he was never an enemy of the English. He wasn't going to go down that way. He wasn't an enemy of Protestants. He was a devout Catholic who was, that's why he's sort of so perfect. You just think, my God, he fits our 21st century very well. He was pro-women, he was pro-Indigenous. He supported Parihaka. He knew about Parihaka, and he called Te Whiti the Maori land leaguer, so they were very conscious. They supported the Indians and their resistance to the empire. So we could go on and we forgot.
But the British rule at the time were quite intimidated by him, really, because he
had moral authority. By the end of his time, he was your Nelson Mandela of his day.
Right.
When he spoke, people listened, and
Wow. And he tell us a little bit about the relationships that he had formed, because there was a bit of a will he, won't he? Even though there was still a bit of is he going to find, was it B. Walsh? Or?
Yeah, B. Walsh is a member of a Mayo activist farming family who were prominent in the Land League in Ireland, and then she came to Sydney with her sister, and she was very prominent in the Ladies' Land League on the executive. So, and it was said after Davitt died, and somebody wrote a lot of articles in a Diaspora newspaper, an old Fenian comrade, and he said, that he was engaged to a Walsh girl. So it's in some of the histories, and of course it's ignored by most historians who don't seem to understand the role of the heart in history and the role of attraction and what the Irish call the graw, the little love, the little grace in the heart. And how much that impacts and calls people to action. So we know that Michael was very circumspect because it didn't happen. There was an engagement that did not eventuate into a wedding. So I was intrigued by this love interest that seemed to evaporate, and I found a few things that I was excited about in footnotes of massive tombs. And I thought, there, I found him. I probably can't go into detail too much here because it's just those delights of the historian who's also writing. Is that quest? Is that there? He wrote to his sister who was living in America, and she wanted to come to Ireland to be part of the struggle. She didn't want to be an American anymore. She wanted to go join the Ladies' Land League in Dublin. And he said to his sister, well, if you're going to go, could you get my stuff? He was in prison. He said, if you're going to go, could you get my stuff from the Mrs. Walsh's, because I don't want to be, a nuisance to them anymore. And I thought, you bugger. He would have left his very little possessions anybody had in those days, but they really had to cherish them. It was probably an overcoat and a suitcase. But anyway, there you go. So he got out of it. He had met, when he was campaigning in the United States, he had met a younger Irish-American lass who fell in love with him, and he did eventually marry her after the Land War. A lot of the people didn't marry during the Land War. They marrying late as part of Irish culture anyway, but that all the men were sort of single and all the women were single. It was like everyone was too busy to get married. They got married later. So he married Mary Orr later, and B came. We didn't know whether B cared about that or not, and just recently, not because of my book, but because of other things, with me talking to the Michael Davitt Museum in Mayo about B. Walsh, because we found her grave, that's in Sydney. So descendants of her sister have sent me photographs of the ring that Michael Davitt gave B. Walsh, but he let her keep it when the engagement was broken. Oh. And I was so excited when I got that email, and I said to them, I just want to know, and I know this is very rude of me, who broke it off, him or her? And there was silence from the other end because I breached Irish cultural law in such a direct question. So they may never
speak around it and have a cup of tea and
yeah, I have to get to London.
Talk about what you want to find out about. Oh wow! And so there are quite a number of strong women, and not only in 19th century Ireland, but also 21st century.
Yeah.
Sydney. Was that something you wanted to delve more into? Was it something you wanted to highlight? Or?
Well, I don't think of them as strong women. I think of them as women.
Right.
And that's what women are like, They're all different, the women. Obviously some people say poor Hillary, but
myself included.
Yeah, and somebody at work was disgusted, how does she stay with that guy? And I thought, well, he was very handsome, and now I'm not talking to the readers. I'm not talking about Michael Davitt. I'm talking about Davitt's descendant, Vianney Ryan in Coogee, who is married, or maybe not, to this woman who adores him. The sun shines out of his proverbial. And we, the reader, in the end, don't feel terribly much of him, but, she has to take a different journey with him. Whereas I can always understand the attraction. Anyway, but it's his sister, his mother, Hillary herself. They are the women of the novel, aren't they? In Coogee, and I just think that's what women are. That women are like, leading exciting.
She only had a bit of a cameo, but I really enjoyed Ash, the niece.
Oh yes.
She was a good character,
wasn't she?
She took no prisoners.
No.
Also very open. Very open. Yeah.
Yes, so she's the new generation. So she's the daughter of the Ryans, that's to the reader. So Ash is a very thin girl who sings in a band and writes lyrics that, rip her lovers apart. So she's a modern girl, right? Whereas the women of other age are going, oh, God, do you have to write those lyrics about, anyway. And, Ash is good. Ash could have been bigger because she is the future. She is, but she's the descendant.
Maybe there's a part 2.
Yeah.
But there was a bit of a mystery along the way as well. So you had a lot of little story threads
Yes.
So, Xavier,
Yes. Where is he? Where is Xavier?
Where is he and what is he doing? And is he alive? And
is he in danger again, or is he sober?
Without giving too much away.
Yeah.
We don't want to. We don't know who has read the book and who hasn't, so we don't want to ruin the story.
No. So we can just say the structure of the book is that one of the Ryans of Coogee is writing the book about the Irish Land War that you as the reader get to read
along the way.
And that character is called Xavier, and he is missing. People are looking for him, and every now and then they find one of the chapters. So it's a pretty transparent narrative device. Sorry about that, but it works. Yeah, it got bigger and bigger. It was never meant to be so big, but it got bigger. And then you just, as a writer, you just have to go with the work when it takes its own direction.
And it's funny that how proud the Ryan family were of their heritage.
Oh yes. Well, you said it yourself. You have it too.
Yeah, true. But probably not to the same level. I mean, they did almost pilgrimages to Ireland. Leanne did. It was.
Yeah. Well, there'd be a lot of us have made pilgrimages to Ireland.
So do you feel that some of your trips in the past were almost pilgrimage?
Also, the fact that he didn't. The failed pilgrimage. Very good at the failed pilgrimage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you could tell you've been in Ireland, the Temple Bar scenes and the
Dublin too. Yes. Yeah. So can I ask you a question? How did you feel about my portrayal of contemporary Ireland? Because I was very scared.
I've been out of it for quite a while.
Oh, that's right. You have to.
I felt it was relatively accurate, to be honest. The streets, the Dublin 2 streets.
Yes.
That's exactly how they are. I can't imagine them any different. They probably have a bit more Polish in them these days, but that's about it.
Yeah.
It was good. And the women, let's not forget about Anna Parnell.
Yes.
Annie. Our heroines almost.
Yes, they are our heroines, and you and another person who's a friend who's born and brought up in Ireland just also expressed to me the distress that the Parnell sisters are not in the Irish curriculum.
Yeah.
That you don't know this glorious history of and so brave. I mean, they were so brave. So they basically were the sisters of the big hero, Charles Stewart Parnell. That my book, it wouldn't be the first one, just tries to take a few pin pricks at him, but gee, people are sensitive when you have a go at Parnell. I had a fight in Castle Bar 3 years ago. The lady serving this beautiful lemon, oh my God, gorgeous cakes in Ireland now. You never used to be, right? Now, great cakes and coffees. Anyway, she just said to me, don't be dissing our Parnell. Because where the Land League was formed in a pub in Castle Bar, it's fallen into disrepair, and council can neither pull it down nor want to put the money in to repair it. Got plaques from the 50s, and every now and then there's a resurgence of interest and gratitude for the land war. So anyway, and I said, why doesn't your council bloody, bite the bullet and repair the pub? It's a part of the hotel ideas. Anyway, and she said to me, we want to spend the money on our hospitals and schools. And I said to her, no, they want to spend it on the roads. That's what they want to spend it on. It's the bloody construction industry. They don't want to spend it on the hospitals and schools. You're kidding yourselves. So they might as well spend it on the memorial to a very brave past. And so back to those ladies, they were the sisters of the hero, but they were braver than him, and they were angrier than him because they personally angry. Anna was more angry, I think, than Fanny. Fanny was more accepting, perhaps, but there were 6 children, 3 girls and 3 boys. I'm making this up, but it's good enough. And the 3 boys, the father died. They all got a house and land, and the girls got nothing. So they had to be married, but they didn't get married. They didn't want to be married. I think they had seen enough. So two of them, actually there's 7 of them, so 2 sisters got married and are hidden from history as a result, and 2 took the path of social activism and are remembered. And one was the poet who wrote the famous poem, it's not famous, but it's famous to me now, Hold the Harvest, which is about...
Yeah, well, it featured, like, I feel like it's now myself after
beautiful line,
to be honest.
You know,
yes.
the God who loves the poor, you know.
And did she really, did it really have the profound effect that you portrayed it in?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. It was read out in a court as proof of, you know, how illegal the Irish Land League was. And so apparently the lawyer who was, you know, for the Crown, who was reading out this terrible poem that was inciting the peasants to resist paying rent, holding their harvest for themselves, not giving anything to the landlord. And he was reading it out as a sign of that's how they are inciting to insurrection, treason, blah, blah. He read it out really well, and everybody cried and cheered, and, you know, in the courthouse. I just love scenes like that. So he shot himself by reading it so well. And
it felt like they were the nurturers. They're what gave the poor, or I know we don't like using the word, the peasant Irish, the will to stand up for themselves. The League was a voice for the poor, disempowered, dispossessed. And David is why he's so crucial there, because he's not, Parnell is a landowner, posh English accent, went to Eton. Now, they loved him because of that as well, because he shouldn't have been on their side, but he was on their side. But David is an Irish-speaking son of, you know, landless people, really, but still with an incredible sense of culture and heritage, you know. That remind me how he learned to, he was taught English.
They went to England, so he was 4 when the family went.
But he got taught to read and write.
Yes, his father was bilingual, so he would, and there was the desire for the children to have something to survive in England, but he did get taught properly after his industrial accident.
That's right.
The Methodists, they paid for his education, you know, as a victim of the industrial revolution.
They felt because he couldn't do labour aside, that he needed to be useful in other ways. And boy was he.
And boy was he. Yes, I know. What a weapon they unleashed.
They didn't realise. But he even his photo, those pictures that you've shown, that he does look quite soft and gentle.
Yes.
Portrayed him.
He's unworldly. I think that's you know, he's not a materialist in any way. He wouldn't have had any idea of earning. He did earn a living through his own writing. In fact, he's a writer, really. And at one stage, he did get money from the Fenians, because he was a Fenian when he was a young fella, and he was 7 years in prison for trying to get guns out of an armament place in London, Chester, actually, sorry, not London, Chester, in order to send the guns over to Ireland for everyone to have their uprising that they'd been hoping for and planning for many decades. Anyway, Informer, of course, blew the whistle, and Davitt gets hauled in. As I said, he was amazing that with his disability, that he managed to work undercover as an arms runner for about 2 years. Anyway, they got him. He was about 19, and they put him in prison. And when he came out, like, he had nothing. So he was very dangerous. You know, that's why when I ponder that, I think
nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. And yeah, anyway, he accepted some money from the Fenian movement in America. And afterwards, he really regretted that he had, because he felt that they thought they owned him. And so he paid the money back. And after that, he wouldn't take any money. People were raising money for him when the second or the third time he was in jail. And he was by now a national, international figure. People were raising money for him everywhere. And he just came out, he said, I can't take it. I'm not going there again. So I'll just write. I'll write for newspapers. I'll write, and people paid him for that, for his writing. Because even when he became an MP in later life, those were the days when you didn't get any money if you're an MP, because you all had so much money you didn't need it. So but his wife, and luckily for him, like, he had 4 children in the end, but this is all not in the book because it's But if people are worried about Michael, well, his wife fortunately got an inheritance 5 years before David died, and that kept her family alive, and their children became major figures in the Free State. And one of them was, what did one of them become? Not Attorney General, Chief Justice or something. It's terrible. I should remember all this.
I should know, but
you should know.
As I said, I've got gaps in my knowledge.
Well, you can do a lot of research.
Irish, though.
Oh, yes.
Didn't keep it up here. There's so much history in Ireland, let me tell you.
Well, I mean, that's it, isn't it? There's so much history in Ireland, you can drown in the history of Ireland, but at the same time, it's highly entertaining.
Yes.
Because it's the story of the diaspora is also entertaining. And I guess that's my push as a diaspora historian, is that we are part of the story, and it's the Irish in Ireland are beginning to accept that it's a global Irish story. It
is.
Yeah.
Very much is. Well, we spread far and wide, didn't we? We had to leave and find other ways.
Yes.
So swimming and the ocean, set by Coogee, is quite prominent in the storyline, and the book actually opens with a very tragic scene where our heroine Anna Parnell alone, basically.
Alone, living under a pseudonym, very angry with the betrayal of the women by the men of the Land League. Very angry, upset of, the death of her brother later, even though she, people don't know whether she spoke to him or not, but she was still upset when he died, obviously. And she was a person who was broken by the struggle. That's the sadness about her, is that others psychologically recovered. When a revolution is over, and people at the time felt it was they didn't get what they wanted, which was home rule, but they did get land reform. They did get rid of the big landlords, and they stopped starvation in Ireland. And they didn't stop the immigration because it was still hemorrhaging, but it increased the chances of survival if you stayed in Ireland. So anyway, she didn't benefit of any of that. She was still so angry. I feel for Anna, but I also wish that she had practiced a bit of forgiveness, that she could have had a better life. But she was, but also we all know, she tried to get somebody to publish her book that she had written to expose the gentleman, and no one would publish it, funnily enough. And so it's like Ned Kelly and the Gerald Derry letter. He couldn't get a publisher. So I feel with Anna that she was broken, and it's very sad.
And that's a true account, isn't it? She ill for crime.
Yeah, and she was living.
But there is now a shrine there for her.
There's a plaque for her, and the Irish president has visited, and cleaned it up and honoured her. So it's the second Irish Mary McAleese. She visited. Yeah. So. Yeah, she did quite good work, Mary McAleese. Like, she visited the Bridget Shrine up in Kildare, and they set the flame alight again, which was very exciting for me.
Hillary then uses swimming as
yes.
Anna Parnell in a pool, and Hillary finds herself in a pool.
Yes, Hillary finds herself in the Coogee Women's Pool, which is a blessing of this area.
We've got a few questions pop in, so we might just cover off some of those.
Okay, cool.
So I'm going to try and do them as chronologically as I can. We have one from Dina. Hi Mary, congratulations on your book. So pleased for you as a strong woman with a cultural respect for others. What is your underlying message for women in this book?
Hilarious. What is my underlying message for women? that's a very big responsibility. I know what, it's the heart, follow the heart. Don't take shit from the guys, but follow the heart. That's it. You know, you can still care for them, absolutely, and help them, but, you know, don't take any shite. And I just think actually what David said about his mother, she never allowed herself to be defeated. And I just thought, that's it. Do not allow yourselves to be defeated.
Yeah, she's, you know, even though she couldn't speak the language, she
Yeah.
went out, had to provide for her family and did so.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So we have Grania O'Keefe from Université Rennes, France. I know I'm not at all. Forgive my
Exciting.
poor accent. Quick question. How would Mary describe Parnell and David's relationship?
Well, talk about bro love, I would say. I would say they were both, I think that David would have been very excited because Parnell was so charming. I mean, so you can feel his power through the E-waves or the whatever waves historians and readers get into. And, you know, as I was saying to Christine before, that Hollywood has made a film about the Irish Land War. It was called Parnell, and it's Clark Gable who played Parnell, and poor old Michael Davitt gets Donald Crisp. So anyway, which I think is unfair. I have my own casting for Davitt, would be Michael Fassbender. There's my plug, Michael, if you're listening in. So I believe that David and Parnell were initially very intrigued, because that's the prince and the pauper. You have privilege and poverty, but you have a passion from both of them, both born same year, children of the famine, 1846. And I think that it probably went very well for a long time, but it didn't go very well forever. And at the end of it, there was the big breakup. And they said nasty things about one another, not too many, because they both were people who tried to be a bit more respectful. But yeah, I think that David and Parnell were very close. There's a drawing, which I can't show you because I didn't put it in, but there's a drawing of the court when they were always in court. The British were always trying to drag them into somewhere. They would chase Parnell to the end, well, the British did, trying to get him involved as if with the murders or with the Fenians, you know, the armed struggle people. Parnell never wanted to say anything about it. Anyway, but there's a picture that somebody took of the court, and they're basically hugging each other, Parnell and Davitt, so close together, and you feel the energy of their brotherhood, shall we say. And then, yeah, the class differences were probably too big. One had a different vision. And Parnell offended the morality of some of them, including Davitt, when it was revealed, I can tell everybody, that he was having an affair with another man's wife, and not only that, they'd had 3 children. And they bought the husband off by getting him a MP ship somewhere out west of Ireland. Anyway, it's a comedy now. It was a terrible tragedy then. Lost. If you really want to, anyway, I won't go on, except, no, I will. I'll say Gladstone, who had been supportive of Home Rule and trying to get the Irish in somehow, he could no longer support them because Gladstone came from, there's a lot of Methodist, Presbyterian, you know, very, very good living people, that he was going to lose their votes if he kept in relationship with this bloody aristocrat who thought he could just have children wherever he liked. And that shocked these devout Irish Catholics as well, because actually Parnell was not a Catholic, funnily enough. And so poor old Croke, the Archbishop, who had so defended the Ladies' Land League and so defended the League, it is said that he picked up his bust of Parnell, he threw it, you know, just, I'd love that in a film, smashing the, you know, Parnell broke their hearts, he broke their hearts, and I don't forgive him. But I should, because that's right, Anna Parnell, I can't say my character should be forgiving and me not. I will forgive Parnell.
We've got a question about some local
yeah, good. Let's go back to
there's an Irish monument. So Pauline Wall has, the question is, there's an Irish monument at Waverley Cemetery, and I think the focus is on the famine, but perhaps you might know.
I think it's on the 1798 rebellion. It's on the transportation. It's on the military history. It's on the military resistance, which the land war is not part of that story. So I don't think the land war's in there. They've got the hunger strikers in there now. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And when I've gone to my pathetic attempt at learning Irish language, they always end it with visiting that particular part of Waverley Cemetery. Yeah, and there's mass said there, oft on. I don't even know, but there is. It's used by the Irish community, the Irish Australian community, to commemorate Irish events. And I actually remember having a fight. Well, not a fight. I had an argument with somebody at work in the days when a colleague who was English didn't like the fact that the Irish hunger strikers were being commemorated down there as well, like Bobby Sands and all, and thought that shouldn't be dragged into Australia. Like Australia should stay clear of that old fight. And I just thought, well, you little do you know that old fight took place here.
So we've got some lovely comments in them. I will read them out toward the end, but I won't read them out now. I'll just head towards next questions. Someone wanted to draw attention to a passage from the book, if I may. Is that okay, Mary, that I read?
Yeah, okay, surely.
So,
yep.
Zita, read previous comment. Here is a passage from the book that is reminiscent of Helen Gardner's writing. Dark clouds passed low, menacing the city. The birds went silent. When the rain finally came, it struck down straight and merciless, lashing people, trees, earth. The beach was deserted, the sand pale and wan from the onslaught, small pocketed by rain's fierce indentation. It had been a spectacular Sydney storm, suddenly tempestuous, suddenly resolved. Thank you for sharing that, Zita. I do remember reading that passage.
I blush. Yeah, sometimes I can write well. But, you know, but
it takes practice, right?
Yeah, a bit of practice.
Someone has mentioned there must be a part 2, too much left unsaid. That's anonymous. And they're not strong women, they are just women. Love it. Sorry, I'm really enjoying the presentation. Just wondering, Mary, do you have thoughts on history versus historical fiction?
Yes, I do have thoughts, many.
That's from Michael Olive.
Well, Michael, nice to meet you. I've written history. I do write history, actually. I think I'm now forming more that I enjoy historical fiction more than history, because in historical fiction you can intuit, you're allowed to intuit, and you're allowed to say things. I usually try to have my characters say things that they've written, you know, that I know that they have written and said and felt, but I can't always, and I don't always, but that's my general rule. I try as a historical fiction writer to be absolutely truthful and honest to the history. So I have my own code of conduct, which I must write up one day. But yeah, so I believe I enjoy fiction. I've read a lot of nonfiction now as a so-called adult, you know, because you're asked to. There's something about reading fiction where you go into a trance state, and I've read it referred to as the ludic trance. That person called it ludic because they can measure brain waves and things like that, and you go somewhere else. And I think it's why people are addicted to reading. All those wonderful women out there who just read. You feel your brain waves, doesn't it? There's this sort of luxury. You never hop into bed and go, oh, I'm going to read a bit of nature writing now, however gorgeous it is. Or you go, oh, I'm going to read the rest of that book, you know. And I love history. I love reading history, but I'm always reading it. I think I'm always reading history with a novelist's eye about what's really going on.
What's the story? What's the passion? What are the motivations behind it?
And we're opening, excuse me for flicking my bra on Zoom, but I think history's opening up now for more of subjectivities. But when I was a young little scholar, they hated what I was doing. They hated it. It was a big fight over what I was doing. And I was a bit naive. They thought I was, you know, the devil incarnate bringing on postmodern or something. But I wasn't. I was just trying to describe subjective states, internal states. And, you know, and love has to be mentioned in history, so they still don't really like it. They still see it as a sort of a scandalous thing, still written as a, anyway. So I think I'm verging more towards historical fiction now, but I love history. I mean, I love the truth of it. Like, there's a big word, I shouldn't say big words like.
And there's another anonymous question. Why do you choose, so it's related, why do you choose to write novels instead of straight history where you could linger on topics with more detail?
Yeah, well, I think I've sort of answered that. I have written histories, but and I've enjoyed them. But there's more poetry in the novel. You can go a bit deeper, especially while the historical discourse, the rules, which I've said are changing and opening up, are still limited to a materialist view.
Yeah, historical fiction, it's a huge genre now. Huge.
Yeah.
It's got variances. Like there's some that are, very true to history, and then there's others that are very creative.
I love the concept of genre new called historical fantasy. I love that. So, where they just create fantasy, but they base them in a historical culture. And
yes, yeah.
I think that's quite nice.
I can see the appeal. So Matthew Purcell, he from Littleton, County Tipperary, 5 miles from where Archbishop Croke is buried in Thurles, and 8 from where John Kelly, Ned's father, was born in Moyglass. Wonderful to have a history lesson from down under. As small farms worldwide tend to become mega industrial farms laced with chemicals, I ask if the land struggle has been in vain.
Oh, Matthew, do not give up hope. Never give up hope. There's a lot of people trying to keep small farmers on their land. There's a lot of books coming out written by small farmers and Instagram posts and things like that. And I'm proud to say that one of our New Zealand Irish diaspora people is one of the people out in Mayo keeping Mayo farmers stay on the land. So yeah, the enemy is always with us, every generation, and the enemy of greed, really. I suppose that's a very Irish Catholic thing to say, but there's an enemy and the resistance, unfortunately, is sort of eternal, but sometimes you can feel wearied by that. But the other case is it's like, that's what we all have to do. We all have to stay awake. Don't let them have it. Don't let them destroy their land. Don't let them destroy and trample on culture. There are people and organizations working to keep small farmers. There's that guy in Yorkshire that writes books, and there's a guy called John O'Connell, which is my brother's name, who's writing about inheriting with some reluctance the farm in the west of Ireland. They're often about men's struggles with their fathers and an authoritarian culture. So we'll wait to see what the other, not dichotomous, but more stories will be coming out. So yeah, no, the land war was not in vain, and it's not going to be in vain as we continue to try to hold. At the moment, I work in a community garden, and we are part of that inheritance of the land for the people, sharing, and not slavery, not that terrible slavery that the industrialized.
Here's a question from Mary. Just to Mary. Hello, I just wonder if Mary found any elements of Celtic spirituality more authentic than the institutional limited religions informing the history of that time.
Well, I think the institutionalized religion was also a pagan religion. I think I don't think it's that separate. I think people are...
A lot of the traditions came from the paganism.
Yeah. And the Catholic Church in Ireland, at least, made a lot of room for the local deities. And the language held the old stories. And Bridget is the most powerful, wonderful, energetic force coming from the pre-Christian culture. And she's still inside the culture, So I'm not so them and us anymore. I just think when people are spiritual, they may take up a religion and then they may discard the religion, as the Irish in Ireland appear to be doing, but that doesn't stop them being spiritual. And being Catholic in the past wasn't not spiritual. It was them seeking meaning, unity, communion, meaning, miraculous events, So I just think I remember reading years ago, but a priest saying that in the 1950s, like the peak, the Marian year, and the Irish all over the world, the Catholic Church had all those thousands of children in their schools, and there were, you know, processions and everything. It was the hugest year they ever had. And he said it was actually the beginning of the end, but none of us saw that. And he said we were so busy running our institutions and running our church, we didn't see we were dying from inside, and that people were beginning to walk away from us. And he said, I can grieve. This was I read it 20 years ago. He said, as a Catholic priest in Ireland, I can grieve that we have died in the hearts of the Irish, but I rejoice that they're still singing. They are being very creative. Like there's still so much music, dance, you know, and he saw creativity as the actions of the Holy Spirit. And I just thought that's a great attitude. Just we let go of the old outer signs of spirit and we go with whatever is with us now, which is part of the past too. But
there's a practical question actually from Jessica Perini. Hi, Mary, congratulations. Being in Australia, how did you manage your primary research? Were you constantly traveling to and fro, or were you able to do a fair amount of it online through digitized resources? And how would you compare that to how you're researching the book you're writing now? In fact, that's a really good question. What are you writing now? Apart from how you do it.
I'm writing a book about the first performance of the Messiah. And that, of course, occurred in Dublin, one of my favourite cities, but it occurred in the 18th century. So its tentative title is Handel and Mrs. Sipper, because I always love a romance. So anyway, so that's enough of that. But back to the question, I didn't go backward and forward to Ireland, really. I have lived in Ireland, and when I went to Ireland, I did have a cup of tea with one of the Davit's major historian, who very kindly agreed to meet me, and she paid for the cup of tea as well. And, you know, I just tried to pick her brain. She had devoted herself to David. Carla King, her name is. And she, like me, she had not intended to devote her life to David, but he had taken her over. And, you know, I said to her, just, you know, 3 things about Michael Davitt, you know. So anyway, I can't remember the 3, of course. I just remember the cheek of me trying to get her to condense it. But one of them, she said, sincere, honest, you know, and unworldly. I think that's what she did say. So, you know, excuse me, I'm getting excited, jumping up and down. But so no, I didn't go backward and forward. And, you know, the internet is a marvel, and Wikipedia is a marvel. And also all these old books are being digitalized by the Americans often. So the universities, and luckily for me, I'm a member of a university, the unnamed one up Radwick. And I can access, thank God, you know, JSTOR and Google, you just put in tiny obscure little phrases and they go, find you that. So I had to buy books. How terrible! I had to buy books because they A-Books is the online bookshop that finds old books, old rare books, and not terribly expensive. I never bought anything I'm mean, so frugal. So anyway, so yeah, I've done a lot of internet. I've read books. I've had my own inheritance. I have my own memories and experience. I lived in Dublin in my 20s. I come from the Irish landless labourers, but some of them had land, small farmers, you know, a shoemaker, you know. I have my own inheritance and experience. So there you go. And my own feelings, I guess that's what it is. I still cry sometimes when I read some of my book, and I'm not crying because of what I'm writing. I'm crying because of the deep feelings in the history, in the world, you know, in whatever it is that we share, that is passed down. The grief is passed down, which is coming back to what I wanted to write the book about, was how do you communicate that grief, of a cultural grief? How do you share it with somebody who's coming from a culture that has wiped the past, which was and is less so now, of course, but white Australia. So yeah, the determined to forget. So, and then the culture like ours determined to bloody remember. So
Lucy says your book would make a fantastic film or series.
Oh, I think so too, Lucy. So do I, with Michael Fassbender, although time is running on, he's getting a bit old, but, you know, we might have to go for the next juicy Irish actor. But is that sexist of me? Yes, it probably is. But yeah, no, I think there's some great scenes in it, isn't it? I just think it would be so good. And I really wish, you know, that RTE had money. Like this is part of the problem of not being a rich country, is that Ireland has so many wonderful stories and not enough TV series. Like, as I say in the book, don't want to hear about Henry VIII, you know, or what's his name, Wolf Hall. You know, I'm sick of British history. I want these wonderful stories to be told, you know. In fact, bloody ABC, of course, understaffed and under-resourced now, but they could be helping us tell the stories, you know. These are terrific stories.
There are many more comments and really kind words. So
thank you, team.
Mary, thank you for popping them in. We don't have time to cover them all. Just one last question. But before we ask that last question, one of the other questions was, where can you get your book?
Yeah.
Can you get your book? So we've popped in a couple of links. You can buy it from Constant Reader. They were going to be our bookseller who were going to support our in-person events. So it's such a shame that, you know, you're not able to see it physically and get it signed. So Jay from Constant Reader has copies of the book readily available. If you are not in Sydney shores, various online booksellers will be able to get that for you. We won't mention any names, but I think you all have the ones that start with B and A. And have I got it?
Yep, that's what it looks like.
And it's actually, I come from a publishing background, and it's a beautifully produced book, so it's a nice one to have on your shelf.
So that I can shout out to Mary Louise Brammer, who's the designer of the cover, and to Tableau Publishing, who are the people responsible for the layout of the book, Tableau Publishing in Melbourne. There you go. I thank them. Goodness.
And maybe just one last question, Mary. I was interested in your observation about the Irish in Ireland just beginning to accept the diaspora Irish experience as part of Irish history.
Yes.
Has the attitude been? Can you speak to that? Thank you, Michael Olive, for that question.
I think the attitude has been not terribly interested in what happened. There's reasons for that. Some of them are guilt. Some of them are not interest. I remember when I was a young person and living in Dublin, they just despised the Irish Americans, and you know,
I think the Americans kind of.
Hear that? Here it is.
Could it be sixth generation, and then they're Irish, you know?
Well, and they are, is my argument. They are.
Yes, but
so, you know, nobody would say you would stop being Jewish just because you're 6 generations away. You know, true. Yeah, and there was sort of no, and that I'd explore that in the book. There's no understanding of that. There are Irish Australians and there are Irish New Zealanders, and each one has a different experience in relationship to the dominant state, and has different series of heroes or heroines or different memories, etc., etc. So they are now having global diaspora things actually in Dublin, that we, the Australasian crew, turn up. But it's still a little bit, they're not terribly interested, and we're going, but what about us, and etc. So, and also there's a terrible thing they tell the poor old London Irish. A colleague at work, he just said whenever they went home, his parents took them home to Kerry, the cousins in Kerry would just call them plastic paddies. Did you hear that, Christine? And I just think that's so rude. Like, so the pain of dislocation, you know, is then you turned around and called plastic. Plastic. Plastic, you. So I also remember once on a ferry from Dunleary to Holyhead, the young lads all doing this big dance with their feet. We are the London Irish, you know, and sort of we didn't know what was going on, but now we understand cultural identity, a separate one. You know, and defending themselves against that plastic paddy bullshit. So I don't think that goes on now. I think there's a much more globalized Ireland and an acknowledgement, but they still don't know much about us. So we're here to tell them. That book is one of the ways I'm trying to tell them. But I don't have to preach to them. Oops, I do. But, you know, I was trying to explore a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, unfortunately, that does, we're gone a little bit over time.
Oh, no, well, that's normal. That's okay.
Hanging on till the end. Again, The Country of Our Dreams, and Mary has other books as well. Thank you so much. Again, we will pass all the comments that I haven't read out to Mary afterwards. Thank you so much for your participation. If you do want to watch this again, or you want to share this event with your friends or family, we will be putting it up on the Randwick City Council YouTube channel. You will be able to get a link to that. We will send an email out when it's available. We'll send it to the Eventbrite mailing list that we for everyone that signed up tonight. So thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Mary. Thank you,
Christine. Thank you to Randwick City Library. Thank you. Thanks to all the people that tuned in tonight. Goddess bless you. Love you all. We should say our bit of
August. I don't know what else to say.
We'll just say go. Oh, yeah, Slongafoil. We'll just say Kuplafocal. We'll just say thanks. We'll just say thanks and good night. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Christine.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.